Welcome to UNCAGED. Today we're speaking with Elena Rodighiero.
Yes, that's a hard one.
Yes?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Elena, thank you so much for joining us on the UNCAGED show. Elena is a consultant at Egon Zehnder. Egon Zehnder is one of these companies that perhaps doesn't really need a ton of description. It's one of the leading executive recruiting firms in the world. Elena actually focuses on recruiting, but also works on leadership development and advisory. She focuses on the energy and technology practice group. We're going to be talking a lot about recruitment. We're going to be talking about a lot about leadership development. But before we get there, Elena, tell us a little bit about you and your career.
Yes, I would be happy to do that. Well, originally I'm from Italy, which is what makes my last name so hard. I was born and raised in Milan. I moved to the US after, I am a nuclear engineer to start with. So I love energy, love technology, love engineering, and all of the above. And then I actually moved to the US in 2014 for my MBA at Harvard. Like, my studies is what got me into the States. A fun fact about that is that at that time, my husband and I just had our first child, who was 3 months the day we actually moved. So he flew on his 3-month kind of, not birthday, obviously, but like anniversary. And he has lived most of his life in the US despite being born in Milan. And then during my MBA, we had our second child, who is a girl in that case. And she is actually from Boston. So quite interestingly is that she is American, obviously, and she has the blue passport and we don't. So she's very proud of the colorful passport that she has, and we do not. So
that's funny. I have a similar story. My ex-wife, the mother of my 2 children, is from Spain, and one of my children was born in Spain. The other one was born in Chicago. And when the younger one was about 9 years old, he was at the swimming pool one day, public swimming pool one day, and he was chatting with this young girl his age, and I think he was trying to impress her. And he said, oh, well, my mom and my brother, they're from Spain, but my dad and I, we're from the tough streets of Chicago. So there you go. Always funny.
Well, there is a fun fact in that, if you don't mind, I will just share, because I think it's hilarious. We were traveling to Europe, and my daughter, as an American citizen, she needs to show her US passport to come back, right? That's mandatory. And we do not have it, right? So my son was showing, he was 3 or maybe 4, they were little. And he was showing his red Italian passport, and we have beautiful pieces of art, statues, beautiful palaces that you would find in Rome, in Florence, and so on and so forth. And she has the blue passport with the cows and the pioneers and the eagle. And he threw a tantrum at the gate because he also wanted the eagle and the cows and the animals. Who cares of the beautiful art of Italy, right? So that was funny. I'm sure he will be very happy to get the blue passport at some point.
Someday. Well, listen, Elena, so it's great, obviously, the way you started, and clearly I can see that you have worked at many, many corporate firms, but now you're at Egon Zehnder. So tell me more about what you and the team are building there.
Yes, well, we are obviously a global firm that works most specifically in executive search, but also in leadership advisory. And for teams, for individuals, it goes into development, coaching, a lot of, bespoke work for teams. That is really my passion. So the combination of executive search and coaching, developing people in what is their full potential, is what brought me at the firm. So what I focus specifically, as you mentioned, is 2 particular industries, technology and energy, mostly when they are connected. And there is a lot of work in that particular space, a lot of evolution. But also really my big passion is to look at people, their lives, that development, that professional career, which is always one of the characteristics we look at, but also it is one aspect of your broader life, right? So you are a person to start with, and then you are a professional, and there are so many things that come back and forth from personality into work. So looking at people as human beings as they develop in their career is what really fascinates me.
Yeah, I think it's a not only fascinating area, but quite a interesting space. And in particular, right now, I would say over the last several years, it could perhaps be one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting area to work in, because we live in this world where work has completely changed. I mean, the world that I knew before 2020 has evaporated. And now we live in this very new work style, work life. What leadership is, I feel, has dramatically shifted. Elena, I mean, when you think about your space, what are the things right now that are bubbling up as the things that your customers really are concerned about, what that they're thinking about right now?
Yeah, well, to your point, the post-pandemic word is different from before, right?
Yeah.
So I actually joined Egon Zehnder right before pandemic. Of course, I had no idea. Nobody had any idea, but I barely saw our profession before it because we got into lockdown quite quickly. So the readjustment, location, there is a lot of conversation around what is the best location to invest, the hybrid model, back at work, back at the office, in which ways people we observe make choices in different ways than before, in the sense that they prioritize maybe family and location in a completely different way, since the in-person culture, quite honestly, is building up again, but not to the point that it was before. Obviously, it's a completely different scenario in that sense. And I would say maybe another aspect that is very relevant for me, I am based in California in particular, I'm sure it is going to be permeating the word, but specifically that is what I see here in Silicon Valley, is AI that is going to have a completely transformational effect on everything we do. It already has, and it is for sure going in that direction. Now, in my personal case, one of the reasons I am so curious about human beings, their emotions, the way they translate emotions at work, you cannot work without emotions. Even if you think of doing it, or if you try, there is no way you can actually decouple yourself or detach yourself from emotions, from your own emotions. So the AI is a very interesting topic. We observe a lot. There is a lot of conversation about the evolution of recruiting, with maybe powered by AI or with some sort of AI aspects, which is why I am so motivated and passionate about the human being, because it is to some extent the opposite. And, in my personal thinking, I don't think that the human connection or the human emotions part of it is going to be changed. Maybe it is going to be changed, but it's not going to be substituted by AI per se.
Yeah, it's a great question. Certainly, I see a lot of the work that people are talking about in terms of how generative systems are going to play a role in recruiting. And I can absolutely see it. I did a ton of research in the AI space over the last 5 years. And one area that really got impacted early was call centers. And it was really just kind of smart listening, listening into systems and essentially giving people assistance on potential scripting of where they should go with the conversation. And I can only imagine the same thing will happen in recruiting, when you're talking to individuals, when you're trying to perhaps recruit a more diverse, equitable, or inclusive culture. Certainly, I can see a lot of exciting things happening there. But Elena, let me shift gears for a second and just talk about the broader space of, I'd say, leadership and development or talent development and then recruiting. I mean, you are clearly someone that has worked in a wide variety of fields. You have an incredible background and you could do anything, but what is it about this that drives your passion? I'm going to say a very American thing. How does this, get you up in the morning to get going and get excited?
Yes. Thank you for the question. It is really what got me into the industry I am in this consulting work and advisory work that we do on leadership. So you were right, I was in corporate before, mostly focused on technology companies in different spaces, from industry to tech, the way Silicon Valley defines it, that is software. And I was at Microsoft more recently. And the companies I have been with I was really lucky. They are incredible companies. And I got exposed to a lot of best practices in leadership, a lot of, conversation around the culture, not only the strategy, but also the culture and how the two stay together. I actually had an amazing experience related to my business school that was basically going back to talk about the Microsoft shift in terms of strategy and culture for the go-to-market with the cloud. So the cloud transformation drove a lot of conversation. And I loved all that aspects and all that conversations. However, something was missing in, my passion was mostly to investigate how people behave and why at work. So as a consequence of behaviors, we observe changes in culture, changes in leadership styles, building teams, or changing, maybe dismantling teams and parts of the organization. So my curiosity was really about what is the human aspect of it. And when I opened my conversation with Egon Zehnder, basically the reason I spoke to them is to answer your question, what gets me up in the morning, that is, how can I help people to crack the leadership problem, which is, by the way, impossible to crack, it's too complicated, but what is my role in it? How can I help them see themselves in a different way as they develop in their careers or as human beings? Being inclusive of new kind of talent is also super interesting. It is very challenging, in particular when I work in observational roles, highly technical roles. There is a problem in the pipeline, not just in what we see today. So it's a longer conversation in that sense. However, the fuel I get and the energy I get from work is really to get connected, if you let me say so, to the cracks of any human being. You can go to the top of the house and all the way through the organization at any level. There are people who have people's problems, not just business problems. And any conversation becomes a lot more interesting when those show up. I would say life comes through the cracks, right? Like many of us, to your point on resumes and LinkedIn, along with other technologies and software for recruiting, they give us they all give us images of ourselves. That is the professional part of it. However, the person behind it always has some areas that are so interesting to explore and make us who we are. So that kind of curiosity and investigation of the cracks is what makes me happy.
Elena, the space that you work in, as you mentioned, is evolving quickly. Certainly over the years, there were kind of tried and true things that we would use. Maybe you would go to LinkedIn, maybe a couple other databases, and that would help you know what's going on. But it continues to evolve very, very quickly. Tell me a little bit about what you see on the horizon here. I think back about recruiting really during COVID, and it was fascinating to me to talk to some of the customers that we work with in the recruiting space. And suddenly the priorities of things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, because of that summer of social unrest, suddenly became a number one priority. And then now, as you just mentioned, AI is a number one priority. So it clearly shifts quite a bit as things evolve. But 2024, what does it look like?
I would say the two trends that you mentioned will stay. So we don't see them going away at all. If anything, they are going to be stronger. A general evolution we keep seeing is less control, in the sense that the complexity, it is really a VUCA experiment, the one where we live in, like a lot of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. We have been thinking about that in theory for years. As you see, many books behind me, and many of them talk about those kind of scenarios. Now we are in the scenario. Before, it felt more, of course, we all had some VUCA elements, but it was mostly an idea of pushing ourselves to the limit and think what happens in that case. Now we can say we are immersed in that reality. It is a real life experiment we are all part of. So when I say less control, what I mean with that is the complexity is so high and is increasing, right? Because of the amount of data, AI is obviously a component of it. The willingness to be more inclusive as a society and the diversity we get in that, they all come together. There is potentially no person on earth who can have a full control of every single element. And if you look at the history of recruitment, if you look at the profiles of CEOs, there were really people who need to know a lot about the business, the functions, every single division and product, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Now, it is not about that. Now, nobody would be able to have a brain that can contain that amount of information or can control that amount of complexity. And therefore, it's about how do you make people successful in an environment that is so conflicted, and there is a lot of polarity between so many things and aspects. So the point is to work with less, to be able to control less and empower more, to be able to have some trust in people who, making decisions with a very small amount of information. And that is true at multiple levels within organization, in particular at the top.
So one of the things I just wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on, and that's just because you focus on, I think, the energy sector and maybe technology too, is really the topic of sustainability. It was really interesting to see the push over the last couple of years to kind of a more sustainable economy. And certainly, I think as we focus more on global warming and climate issues, I can imagine that literally there can't be a leader that doesn't consider those things. But how are those elements or skills viewed in the kind of energy and technology sectors?
It is top of mind for every company, in particular public companies, because there is not only financial reporting, but also sustainability reporting now. So almost every company has a chief sustainability officer to start with. And of course, it's true for any given industry. In particular, energy is part itself, by definition, of sustainability in terms of energy transformation. And there is a big push within the industry, obviously, to evolve, the Green Deal, IRA, and a lot of investment to push for that change. At the same time, there is a lack of proof in what is going to work and what is not going to work. So
right.
I look at that as a huge experiment that we are living through, and a lot of experimentation, a lot of change, and also in terms of talent, a lot of adaptability, because we have to look at adjacencies quite a lot, given that so many new companies are trying to go do things that have not been done before. Yeah. In terms of tech, I would look at that mostly as a horizontal aspect of it, in its horizontal aspect as opposed to as a vertical. It is obviously a vertical as an industry, but it is also shaping every other industry you can think of with technology, including you and I speaking right now on a tech platform, right? So yeah, any kind of industry is being quite dramatically reshaped, by tech in many ways. And there is an element that is maybe less obvious to the broader audience, but tech necessitates a lot of energy to actually work. Think of data centers, right? So at top of mind for them, it is to some extent not obvious, but they invest, those companies, the big companies, invest in a highly differentiated portfolio of investments in terms of energy resources. Some of them only get energy out of wind power or clean tech, right, to make sure they offset. So it is top of mind for them. And there is a big push coming from tech to change the energy they get power from. So energy transition, back and forth.
Yeah, well, lots of change. Elena, it's been amazing having you on the UNCAGED show. If someone wanted to learn more about what you and your team are up to, where's the best place to reach you?
Probably the best place is LinkedIn, and there's a link to my profile at the firm, to my email. So happy to, connect there.
Excellent. Well, Elena, thank you so much for being on the UNCAGED show today. We've been speaking with Elena Rodighiero. I feel like I'm overly pronouncing the Italian side of that, Elena, but I'm doing my best here on that one. It's been wonderful to chat with you today. We've been talking about how that executive recruiting and leadership space is evolving quickly. The skills that are needed for today and tomorrow are really rapidly shifting on the soft side, on the hard side, on the tech side. But I think that Elena had a wonderful way of phrasing it, which is that at the end of the day, it's that human element is the critical core piece, and how that human piece fits in with these technology AI partners that we'll all have to figure out how to work with going forward is going to be key as well. Elena, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back.
Thank you.